The Planning Commission podcast is a spirited discussion with myself and a couple of my longtime colleagues in the profession. Our discussions are based solely on our own opinions and do not reflect the opinions or views of our employers, the American Planning Association, or even our alma maters. So grab a seat in the back of City Hall, dig out an old copy of Robert's Rules, and for goodness sakes, read your packet. The Planning Commission is now in session.
What's up, everybody? Another episode of the Planning Commission podcast is ahead of us. Today, plan, Edison, plan. What the heck? Where do we get our information? Where do you learn? How do you learn? Where are all the sources that good planners sort of go to, right? To be better? Is it web sources? Is it movies, as we've talked about? Is it conferences or all the above? We're going to learn a little bit about that because I think for the three of us, one of our sources, our resources for years has been someone who represents that organization in just a few minutes. But in the meantime, first of all, hi, commissioners. How are we doing?
Doing
Good
great.
afternoon.
Good
Feeling
afternoon.
good.
Feeling
No, good
good?
morning. I'm still
Good
morning here.
Yeah, you got to remember she's on Alaska time, right? So it's true.
Wait, forever and ever. It's kind of
Yeah,
like being on
yeah.
island time. And if you haven't looked at a map lately, you might think Alaska is an island. So just
Yeah.
you
Such
can
a
get here by
different world
boat.
out
That's
there.
true.
It's just southwest of California near Hawaii.
Yeah, we like to hang
that's
out
where it
there.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, we have similar values. We really like the beach, all of us.
And soon your son is going to be like for 3 hours. So it'll be morning 21 hours out of the day or something, right? Like
Chris, when you said your son, I was just like, I have a child. I was really confused for a second. I was like, yeah, so the sunshine in the sky. Yeah, it's pretty dark. I mean, it's dark when I go to work and it's getting ready to be dark coming home from work. So
very different than Florida.
yeah. But you know what? Here's the thing to look at it. We're, losing so many minutes of sunlight every day right now. But when we get to Christmas, it switches the other way and it's pretty quick. That sunshine comes back. So we'll be in Alaska summer before you know it. And all you people are going to be so jealous.
First time, so actually we share something because on that subject briefly, I went from Jacksonville, Florida, where I was doing my training. And then I had to report up to Whidbey Island, Washington, which is up by Seattle. And I did that trek over the matter of a couple of weeks. So I went from Florida, where, typical for me anyway, daylight hours. Next thing I know, I'm in north of Seattle. It's 10:30 at night and people are still playing soccer outside. I'm like, shut up. I'm trying to go to sleep. What are you doing? But it's bright as can be. I'm like, what world am I living in?
Boy, that is a beautiful place in the world in the middle of the summer. I'm just not even going to lie about that. Yeah. But okay.
Definitely.
Fabulous weather.
Sure.
We're looking forward to it.
There you go. All right. So commissioners, I want to ask you a question. Where do you get your information? All three of us, I think, are inquisitive individuals trying to stay sharp, that tip of the spear. Where do you go to make sure that spear is sharp? What's your thinking?
This is going to be good. So
oh, you're going to nerd out. I feel it. Wait,
no,
I feel it. Jess is going to nerd out on us right now. It's going to be
okay. For our young planners that are listening, trying to figure out how to do this the way they are. And you think I'm smart, boy, this is how I do it. Work harder, not smarter. For years. And Don Kostelic, thank you, sir, is one of these people. I have gathered people in my life that I thought were smart and good at their job. And I would just call them and be like, hey, what's going on in planning right now? And Don, how long have we been doing that? And I don't know that you have ever called me for information, but I have called you. He calls me. He's like, "What's the moose count on the Glen Highway these days?" And I'm like,
well, see, that's important. That's the kind of trivial stuff I like to know. That's of a value
across the bow
out there.
So, I have kept in touch with professors and teachers, friends that were, much older than me, like Don, and then just
seasoned.
For everyone here, you guys have to understand, when I started working with Don, I was 23 years old, fresh out of my little school program, and Don seemed like he was a real expert. And what were you, 29, 30?
Yeah.
Right now, it doesn't even matter. So I would call people that I thought were, I kind of just collected people and what they were good at. And I, to this day, and now it's occurred to me, it's been a decade plus since I've been And, since I've graduated from my graduate program, and I'm sitting here going, I still call, I have cell phone numbers of my graduate professors and say, hey, what do you think about this? But also, I look not just to people that are in planning, but people who are kind of around planning or have been engaged a lot. Like one of my favorite people to call to see what's going on in the planning world in Alaska is a friend of mine who she used to be the president of AARP. I'm telling you, those folks are
Yeah,
real
yeah,
interested.
yeah.
They have a lot of the pieces. So that's me.
Awesome.
I call people I know and say,
I
hey,
love
what's
it.
going on?
Professional cliff notes, like you know
Yes,
what I mean?
get it to
Like,
me.
reach out and touch someone, right? The old that's really
Oh,
dating myself. That's the what was that? The
Chris,
National AT&T or
I don't
something.
know. I
AT&T,
think we just
Yeah.
had a
See?
moment. You're going to have to, yeah, we're
Ma
going to cut that
Bell.
out.
No, that was an advertising slogan
Mhm.
that
I
had its
know.
time.
Things have
So
changed.
yes, they have.
No, it's good. You
I
gotta
had
have
to,
those
oh
folks.
my God. I had to, my daughter the other day, we're driving around and she sees some smoke. And if you come into Boise, you know that they do drills out by the airport all the time. So you kind of see it regularly. And she started asking me about, getting it out quick, and she gets a little nervous. And I had to explain that our emergency services have gotten better. She's like, well, why? I said, well, everybody has a cell phone, and she said, well, what do you mean? What was before that? And I go, ooh, there was payphones. Like, what the hell's a payphone, Dad?
Ooh.
Oh man, I have to
Well,
explain
yeah, we
what a
wandered
payphone
around
is.
completely untethered to the GIS
And you had to
system.
have, yes, and you had to have specific coinage, right? So anyway,
Hmm.
digress. Don,
Yes.
where do you get your information from as a fabulous practicing planner who apparently informs Jess once in a while?
Well, I think you bring up a great point, Jess, and I'm reminded of it. I used to go to Transportation Research Board every year and how
Mm,
small this profession is as a whole. And so even the people you meet in places like that and realize they might have a certain niche or something, that's who Dr. Wes Marshall at University of Colorado, Denver. It's just one of my go-tos on that because he's practicing engineer, practicing planner, and an academic. So I can be like, hey, is there research on this? And he can probably tell
Mhm.
me. Aside from that, I think what I've found is I enjoy going to seek the perspective of people who are more maybe social or urban commentators that
Mhm.
aren't in the field, but they've got this outside perspective. They kind of know about it. They interact with cities, they do these things, but their commentary isn't coming from this wonky policy practicing planner side. And I think I try to see it as a way to be a little grounded in what we're doing and trying to get as best we can outside the group think of that. So whether it's social media channels or other places to get those things from, that's where I find as maybe not a outwardly bouncing of ideas, but looking at how they're responding to the ideas of the profession to see if that might reflect what the broader populace is
yeah.
looking at.
That's a good point. And I think that's one of the real benefits of our information society, I would say, I guess, over the last 10 years, is that instead of it used to have to be where you'd have to go out and purposely search for things and find things and so on. And yeah, there's still some of that now, but like, I know from my perspective anyway, man, it's so nice to be able to sign up for various websites, various, nonprofit entities that collect good information, research, all of these things, and it basically comes right to your inbox, and you get to wade through the different things that are I think germane to our industry nowadays. And so I find myself definitely trying to, like, once a week, tune in, a webinar once in a while, and that sort of thing. I think it's brought the conference perspective right to your own living room or office or what have you, which I appreciate at times. Conferences are expensive, right? And very limited in that way. I think, you have to pick your track. And now, man, technology is so much better about letting you just go wherever and however you want. And I really respect that. And I think it's good. I think if we are not informed about what's going on in the planning world nowadays, you're just not trying. It's pretty easy to keep your ear to the grindstone or what have you, whatever the old saying is. And so I think that it's pretty straightforward. So cool. Well, one of our guests coming up here in a minute is going to talk a lot more about that. And the services that his company provides, which I think are fantastic, and all of us have used it. In the meantime, it's time for the whiskey pairing. We're going to change it up a little bit because I too partake in whiskey. I don't. We might have to I don't know how many bottles you got at your house right now, Kostalik.
I just brought 8 back from
Oh, whatever.
Tennessee from the trip,
Oh.
so it's
That's right.
amplified a
just
little bit.
stop. Just stop because
You're
I
making us all feel
know.
bad.
No, I know where
It's
he went
baseball
on his
cards for
travels.
adults. That's what you said. You had the greatest
No,
analogy.
that's
of
called
that is-
alcoholism.
Yeah,
That's called
well-
alcoholism. You couldn't get drunk on the stick of bubble gum and that wasn't the case. Now it's a problem. We have to have an intervention. And they're not the same price. I know your taste in
No, they're
whiskey.
not.
It's
Two of
50
them
is-
are for Commissioner Danley's household.
That's right.
So
You better say that because I know where you went. And first of all, okay, we have to full disclosure. We might as well share with our audience. This Jack Ball, because I'm going to call him that. He went to Nashville and went to my favorite distillery, right, and got a chance to learn and see. And then you're not a person who likes candy corn yet because you were at the distillery. They made you whiskey candy corn shots and you enjoyed it. So see, that's like strike 5. You're out. You're done.
and at the end, I got to go behind the bar and got to make my own favorite cocktail, a Sazerac, with their rye and with their absinthe, and learning it from their bartender.
I thought we were friends.
You're dead to
this
me.
Is just,
You're dead.
We're
You're
out.
dead to me.
And Chris had meetings that day, so he couldn't be there.
Oh yeah. Yeah, then there was that. I had to cover for him. Not only was he at the distillery, you went twice. I had to cover for you in a number of ways. So anyway.
Well, hey, you get to do the pairing today as a result. So I'm happy to turn over the duties.
Oh boy.
Wow. That's
what do you
great.
got? What do you got?
You're welcome.
Here is our whiskey pairing for today's episode. It is called Navigator. What?
Ooh.
That's pretty good, right? Navigator is a whiskey I picked up when I was recently in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Because when I go for work that combines planning and public health, I peruse whiskey. Straight bourbon whiskey, but the twist is it's actually not technically authentic as per the Kentucky laws, which are really strict because it's finished in red wine barrels. So it has a slight flavor to it. But I've noticed that this one also has another little twist in that it's bottled by a company out of American Canyon, California. And that really speaks to the whiskey industry, right? It's been bastardized in so many different ways. It's put everywhere. But nevertheless, it actually is pretty good, as you can tell. This is not a brand new bottle. It is, the seal has been cracked in.
So how does it tie to today's theme?
Well, as a navigator, I think that us in this industry trying to find information and find our way like a good navigator should. And when you look at the bottle, it's actually pretty cool. I'll hold it up for the camera. You can't see it, obviously, if you're listening, but it's all a map, right? It's finding your destination.
Mhm.
And that's as close to what I felt like I could get to in my liquor cabinet with today's episode and our guest. So there you go.
I love that, Chris, for 2 reasons. One, because of Planetizen. We'll decide how to say that later.
I'm sure you're not the only one.
There's planet in the word. And then the other
Yes.
thing is thank you for serving our country, Chris. But that was just too predictable. Navigator from a Navy guy. Come on. But I still appreciate
Well, yes, it was I don't know how I substituted for the
punny.
K-man, but I am punny. I did my best. So with that, let's move on to our guest and talk about some real things. So today's guest, James Brasuell, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly too, but he is our editorial director for Planetizen, which is a fantastic site that we all have used, which if you've not been to that as a planner, first of all, how dare you? But secondly, it should be on at least your weekly website go-to to find out what's going on in this country and to make sure that your skills are sharp. So James, thank you for joining the Planning Commission podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's just start off with a little bit about you. We'd love for you to introduce yourself to our listeners, about your background, where sort of it came from, and where and how you landed with this organization, and then the mission behind Planetizen, and tell us all about that.
Sure. So just to clear up the pronunciations.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Help us.
Yeah. It is very common. This is, every person I meet at an APA conference or, ASLA or anything. Oh, this is the first thing that they say is how do you pronounce the name? And it's Planetizen. It's a combination of planet and plan and netizen because the company goes back to 2000 and citizen really. I can't claim any credit for the name. Credit for that goes to our founders. And then my name is James.
To know how to spell it.
Yeah, totally. It's I've gotten to the point where I can type it without looking. So that's and my name's James Brasuell. That's pronounced like casual. So if you already follow me on Twitter, my handle is Casual Brasuell, and that's really a mnemonic device to pronounce my name correctly, but also sort of a family slogan that goes back, But yeah, so I'm not actually a planner by background. I studied English. I wanted to be a writer. I got a master's actually I studied poetry, the political poetry at the University of Chicago.
Wait, back up. Political poetry?
Yeah,
I didn't even know there was such a thing.
Yeah.
Just a lot of T.S. Eliot.
There isn't very much good political poetry, which was the point of my studies.
No.
But I was a whitewater river guide on the Trinity River in Northern California, and they're doing a lot of river restoration work there. There was a dam built that completely changed the morphology of the riverbed, and it's had all these outcomes for salmon habitat and really economic development in the entire county and region. So I did a lot of outreach stuff. We used to take government officials on junkets down the river to show them the restoration work, all very nascent at the time. And basically after I finished grad school and I knew I couldn't river guide forever as much as I might have wanted to, when I came to Los Angeles looking for a job in publishing and in media, they had just completed the Los Angeles River Revitalization Master Plan. So this is back in 2007, 2008. And so river restoration was a hot topic at the time. And I was able to sort of parlay my interest in rivers into an internship at the Planning Report, which is a local newsletter for insiders in planning here in Los Angeles. And my boss at the time, Josh Stevens, hired me, and he's still an author he published a book recently. He's one of the editors of the California Planning and Development Report, which is Bill Fulton's publication. So, immediately was immersed in this sort of, constellation of planners and policymakers in Southern California. And so that was, 2008. It was a long time ago. I've been writing about planning constantly since then for the Planning Report. I was the City Hall beat reporter for Curbed LA, really just talking about planning issues and going to City Hall meetings and meeting people and really, deploying some of the strategies that you all were discussing about how you learn and stay in touch with the field. So yeah, that's how I got to Planetizen. Really, I think that Curbed experience really got me to Planetizen. And I've been, I started out as managing editor, and now I'm the editorial director. I've been working at Planetizen for 9 years. I've published 13,000 articles as editorial director or managing editor at Planetizen. So, just constant immersion in the planning field. And now the purview is national for Planetizen, and it has been. But I can tell you that I am studying for the AICP exam, and I'll be taking that on November 15th. So we'll see how that goes.
Have you listened to our episode on AICP?
I haven't, but now I can definitely add that to my list for studies in the next couple.
Put it into the Planetizen study guide.
Yeah.
Pretty good. I would tell you, James, that I appreciate your organization's study guides for AICP. Though they were some of the best stuff out there. I'm not gonna lie, and I did both. I did all of them. I did the one that the APA puts out, and the ones the different planning. So yeah, you're in the right place to know what you need to know to get that test taken care of. So I'm thinking about kind of digging a little bit deeper into your organization. What's really the mission critical here? What was that purpose, that founding, like, number one thing when your founder was like, I need a website that tells all the planning news. I mean, what was there?
Yeah, I think it was really kind of a demonstration project for the technology. And
Yeah.
I think that they were trying to create a web development company, and they knew that they could position themselves on the internet in a way that a lot of other people were not ready to take that role yet. So, this is before Tumblr and Blogspot and all these blog platforms came out, and people could start doing this themselves. So they were able to build the technology platform. I think that really just positioned them early in the history of mass consumption of the internet as the repository of planning information. And that's changed over the years, and we're probably going to talk about this more. But at this point, we have this tremendous archive of planning history. It goes over 20 years, and you can see some of the names that have written for Planetizen over the years, but also the reporters that we were aggregating their news stories and the outlets, and how that's changed, and how the sort of the narrative around these planning developments have changed in those years. So I don't think it started out as a effort to create some historical record, but I do think that that's part of what it's become.
Yeah, I remember being in graduate school and the announcement that this website was being released and what it was, and certainly in finding topics for research papers that we were asked to do, or even trying to dive into certain subject areas. I mean, it quickly became a go-to resource, because otherwise at that time, 22 years ago, you're looking through search engines on newspaper sites and other things. Even at that point, the search engines probably were not as well refined as they are today. What are the hot button issues? What do you guys track in terms of knowing what's getting the clicks? What are you after? What is the planning profession telling you in how they engage with your site? What is popular?
Yeah, that changes every year, I think. And some of that is outside of our control with the technology of social media. Facebook changes their algorithm, and it'll have effects on our monthly traffic. So, some of that's the kind of the purpose of having an editor. I'm not the only one doing the curating anymore. My colleague Diana Ionescu is also doing that. But you have to kind of have a human moderator to see through where maybe some of those things that are outside of our control are influencing the traffic. But I could say right now, there's a couple of really big stories, and one of those is just zoning reform taking all these different shapes in different states and different cities. California basically outlawing single family zoning throughout the state in the last year. Led by Minneapolis and the state of Oregon. But we're seeing parking reform getting passed almost weekly, it seems like at this point. Culver City, Gainesville in the last 2 weeks, Cambridge. So we're really, compared to when I started this job, there is just a tremendous amount of momentum for this field to change directions from where it was. This was all sort of academic, or it was the urban commentators talking about it, but you weren't seeing a lot of this taking place in actual legislation. And there's plenty of interest in these stories on Planetizen. So this is not something that we feel like we have to force feed to the audience. This is something that they're clearly responding to. They want to know more. They want models for how they can implement some of these changes in their communities.
So James, are you able, I don't know if you're able to track, I would imagine to some extent you have, maybe through surveys or whatever other methods you have, but have you noticed differences between sort of the younger planners, the say 5 years and less in time experience, versus those of us with gray hairs, and have been around for a while, in terms of content and what we're searching for?
Yeah, I don't know if we really disaggregate the data like that, but I'm young enough to, I'm quite old at this point, but I'm young enough to remember how out of step I felt with the priorities of the media, and I think that some of that stuff is still carrying over. So younger planners, and we do see some of this in, we also have the Planetizen courses training platform, and we do a lot of user feedback through that platform. And we know a lot about which courses are most popular and what people are asking for. And there's a ton of demand for the things you would expect younger people to be interested in. Non-automotive centered planning is a big one. So anything with bikes or transit is going to be very popular. But the housing crisis, housing affordability crisis is really the other big issue for younger people. And I think that's, the way I think about those issues is that that's how you bring more people into the discussion and more people into a really more informed participation in the process and in the litigation or the deliberation of these ideas in public. And that's what I would say. The things that you expect younger people to be interested in because it affects them on a daily basis, those are really what they're more interested in.
So if that's what they're hitting, what do you think we're missing? What do you see that is maybe a gap out there or something from a content standpoint we could hit on better or improve as a profession?
Yeah. So I'm going to be perfectly frank, that really most of the planning profession is still devoted to the protection of single family zones and single family residential. And that's not something that anybody wants to admit, in the media. They focus on the reforms and sort of brush under the rug 95% of the work that they're doing. And I know, I'm sure that a lot of people, and maybe that's not an entirely fair representation, but every time I look at these rezoning processes, I hear planners promising that this isn't going to affect single family neighborhoods. Like that's almost the first message that you get from a lot of planners. And I think that it's hard to make sense of how far the reform efforts are going to go and how far the new idealism of a new generation is going to get us in solving some of these problems that we all know need to be fixed. I think this plays out a lot you see it maybe more ostensibly at departments of transportation, where, we talk about freeway removal or we talk about bike lanes, but really the vast majority of the money is still going to freeways and arterials and stuff like that.
So but you're talking about what you think, the younger planners are looking at, maybe they're looking at what non-motorized, multimodal, those sorts of things, and then the housing issues. So you said this is what they're dealing with on a daily basis. Well, we could say that anyone at any age is dealing with that at a daily basis. Why do you think that is bubbling up for the less experienced planners particularly? What do you think is really hitting home with them in those topic areas?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's just when you start to have your first experiences out of the comfort zone maybe you had at home or in the university, where you start to really have to navigate the world and take responsibility for yourself. Questions of how am I going to get to work? How am I going to see my friends? Questions of how am I going to afford to live in the city I've always wanted to live in? They start to become much more real, and you start to become political about some of those issues or passionate or interested. I think that's really the question. And so many young planners and young people in this country right now are faced with the prospect of just having no idea how they're going to afford to ever buy a home, or how they're going to be able to afford to rent in the city where the jobs are. I mean, that's just brass tacks. There's no way around that for a huge amount of people. The largest generation in the history of the country, is faced with this problem still every day.
So James, I'll ask you a question about this, and that is, I know that your website, well, you guys do all kinds of things, so I shouldn't put you in any one box here. But, as I think all three of us being practicing planners, we get asked or requested and actively think about always how to engage our audience better, right? And that might be a specific residential population, citywide, whatever the case may be. What are the lessons that you all have learned over the years, whether it's blog posts or successes that you have helped to champion in terms of places that you've gotten it right? What are those lessons that younger and older planners can still learn from your perspective?
So this is going to sound kind of wonky, but it's necessary to have an understanding of sentence structure. There's a lot of
Stop
there's
it.
a lot of
What about basic
Um,
addition? Where are we at on that? No, keep going.
and it seems impossible, and there's a lot of like bromides that people will offer as you know, you can fix all your sentences by never using the word that, or you turn the sentence inside out and then it's going to be better. You know, a lot of those solutions, there's no silver bullet for sentence construction, but there are a couple of little things that if you understand just a little bit better how to use verbs, if you can do that, you can really just empower yourself to communicate so much more descriptively and clearly. And that's really the key. And people just, they start stacking verbs up, or they start using the super generic verbs like is or able to. I mean, how many times have you heard somebody say help before they say the verb, what they're actually saying, or able to before they actually say what they're trying to say? And so, you know, in terms of bringing more people in the conversation, it is going to require a little more attention to the details of what we're saying.
Wow, that's super fascinating to me. And I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, because I'd love to hear an example of maybe what have you seen a common sentence or sort of outreach method and language be versus how you think it should be done based on your experiences, and what probably is also sort of more popular amongst people to catch their attention.
Yeah. I would start by every time you use the verb is or are, form of the verb to be, you start there and ask if there is a more active and descriptive verb that you can use in that case. And there's also do is another one, have, get. These are generic verbs that aren't very descriptive, and what we want to do is describe the precise action that we're trying to describe. So one place you can say, I mean, that's also how you introduce passive voice to sentences and things like that also. So, you know, starting with those two words, is and are, is a great place to just immediately improve the power and clarity of your sentences.
So when you
I'm
read
thinking
like
about
a
every.
staff, go ahead.
I'm
Jess.
sorry. I was just done. I was thinking, and this is probably going to hit home with you too. I'm thinking about every job description for a planner I've ever written or had to read or whatever. And it's like, to, you know, do you will this, you know, expected to act, you know, oh my gosh. So I'm thinking about how I recently had my resume reviewed and and updated and stuff. I'm in business development and marketing, and I was trying to, you know, make sure I'm a good example. And I was thinking, and they had a long list of words like you said, those verbs that we should be using instead of these to be and stuff. And I was like,
Yeah.
boy, there's so many other options out there, but we do get stuck in that rut. So, hey, Don, what were you going to hop in with?
Oh, I was just thinking, James, I mean, what do you sense then every time you look at something like a planning staff report or something before elected officials and wonder, okay, yeah, I can see why this isn't going anywhere because passive voice and a bunch of simple verbs.
I think actually, and you know, I'm probably going to regret saying this, but professionals are better writers than academics are. I think I'm impressed most of the time with how well things are written, and I'm kind of like, where did this city find somebody that knew how to do this? But there are plenty of times also where it's like there's a layer of understanding about how to communicate these ideas that's lost on this. And some of it's just editing. You know, if you have an editor, you don't need to be able to write the sentences perfectly. The editor's going to be able to go through there pretty quickly and fix it up without even having to ask you any questions. But yeah, it's not as bad as maybe I was making it sound. I do think that there's something about bureaucracy that does contribute some efficiency to this whole process. By the time it's done, it's clear enough. Whereas, you know, a lot of academic writing I see, especially in this field, is nowhere near that.
I think it must go back to there has to be one source staff report, because we've all copied and pasted it.
It's all the same
over the years. And so if you had a good source staff report,
Yeah.
It's turning out pretty well. If you didn't, it's not. And the language piece, I think is critical. How do you look at that as an editor in terms of the language around planning? Do you look at it knowing your audience might be a little more technical and you're not as sensitive to that? Or are you trying to put, more simplified language in there so there is a little broader appeal?
Yeah, sometimes it can be, clarity comes from descriptive power. So it doesn't need to be this simple style of writing all the time. You can, build a motor into your writing with bigger words and the right word. Mark Twain famously said the difference between the right word and the almost right word is the difference between the lightning and a lightning bug. Something I didn't get it totally right, but that's the case. And you do have to think about your audience. At Planetizen, we can assume that we have a more informed on planning issues audiences, but we're still very careful about, never using acronyms before defining the acronyms. I mean, that's a huge thing. Whenever we need to explain what some term is or some law is, it doesn't take very long. It's a dependent clause to provide what we call an explainer tag for whatever term we're using. And I think you just have to do that. And it's a challenge. You're essentially writing a definition for some of these terms, and who are you to be the authority on what this means? But you have to have that confidence in your knowledge and your skill with the subject matter to be able to do that. And you're doing your reader a huge favor by being willing to go that far with your communication.
James, I'm kind of a fangirl when it comes to the website's ability to provide educational material. And I was just sort of clicking around just now, and my favorite thing right now, you were just mentioning like defining things. My favorite thing right now on your website is the Planopedia.
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, and I want to know where that came from. Who decided, you know what, we really need to just start making a whole glossary of all the plannerisms and terms that we talk about. I mean, when we first started doing this podcast, we had a lot of goofy things we thought we would do. And then we found out that we're just not that technical with our editing skills. But one of the things we did a couple of times was we would talk about ringing the planning gong every time we used an acronym or a plannerese term that just nobody really knows.
Yeah.
So, I mean, now our listeners can go to Planetizen and look at Planopedia and figure out what a
Planetizen.
Whatever. Listen, if everybody's having this much trouble pronouncing it, I'm just thinking,
yeah. If you can find it on the internet, that's all.
You know what? Visually, here's what I'm going to say about your organization's name. Visually, the word makes a lot of sense, but I am one of these people that reads a lot and I don't know how to say words out loud, and I'm from Western North Carolina. Let's just put all that together. Anyway, so back to this. Done. Okay, so back to this Planopedia. Am I saying that right, Chris?
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks, Jim. You're much nicer than my co-host. Anyway, so on Planopedia, I mean, I was just kind of goofing around and I saw a woo nerf. I don't know what that is.
Wow.
I was like, a woo nerf? This is the best
awesome.
thing ever. I know. I was like, you guys have really gotten this taken care of. So I'm really loving this. So who came up with that? Was that a newer thing?
I came up with that.
You did not. Oh,
so thank you.
I'm really fanning girl hard right now. Thank you.
But my colleague Diana has written a lot of those, so really couldn't have done it without her, and also the blessing of our, I can't take complete credit, but I mean that came out of some of what I'm talking about the need to somebody to be willing to say, I've done the research, I know this is the most helpful way for you to use this term, or if you understand these things about this term, you'll be a much more active and informed participant in not just the planning discussion, but your entire world. I mean, that's what's so brilliant about the field of planning is, it's not just some backwater scientific field, it's access to your entire life, right? I mean, so, it's incumbent on everyone to prepare all of us to communicate on these concepts.
How disappointed were you that?
I'm sorry, hashtag backwater science planning.
Yeah.
Backwater science field. That was amazing. Is that a first? Is that a first? What would you call it? Adjective? What's happening?
I was thinking, like, how disappointed were you that Urban Dictionary was already taken because I was going there to look for different things.
Yeah.
Not fair at all.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was a little we've spent far more time thinking about the posts themselves than we thought about the name of that. I think that was the first idea and we just went with it. But it seems like it's working. That's one of those things. It's proven really popular. It provides us a base of traffic every month and probably surpassing our expectation. And a lot of it's just organic. So some of that's technological and, but some of it's just the fact that this is a keyword rich field. So, just in trying to make sure you're being diligent about your communication and the way you define things, it ends up being super searchable, online.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So James, in the last few minutes, I want to make sure we hit our lightning round and get a little bit of a chance to know you and some of your particular interests and stuff like that. We first of all thank you for sharing your time. Busy guy, I know, and 13,000. You probably have 400 more on your docket. You got to get out here quickly. But again, so thank you for your time in advance. My first lightning round question is: I know, having lived in and been raised in Southern California region, my question is, how many freeways will you be taking? What and your route, particularly sometime this weekend, as per similar to the SNL skit, The Californians? Run it down for us.
I am going home to my alma mater at UC Berkeley to hang out with some friends on the hill above the football stadium where you can watch football for free. This is the first time since the
Nothing
pandemic.
else is free for Berkeley, so you might as well get that right.
Yeah, that's right. We call it Tightwad Hill. I haven't been to Berkeley or to a football game since before the pandemic, so I'm really looking forward to reconnecting with some of my friends there.
Nice.
But I will get on the 101, take the 101 to the 170. Yeah, the 101 to the 170 to the 5 to the 580 to the 680.
See, yeah. I know, and there's probably 5 more.
Listen.
People don't understand that world, man.
I would love to take a train. I would love to take a train.
Here's what I just heard. You real good with words, James. Not numbers.
So here's one. How many times, being an editor on a planning website, have you mistakenly allowed pubic meeting to go in place?
That's happened more than once. Yeah. I have also accidentally more than once in a headline published the word shit.
Oh,
yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Was it an accident? Was it?
Yeah, it definitely was. That's one of the symptoms of not having a full, and nobody really has the full fact checking and full copy editing capacity anymore, but we do our best and we do miss it sometimes. It feels absolutely terrible to make a mistake. I can't, people think that journalists don't care if they make a mistake. I promise it's a sick feeling.
It's right.
Oh
yeah. We get that in consulting. You'll put out a proposal, you spend 40
Yeah.
hours on it, you send it in, and the moment after you hit send, you're finding the misspelling or something in a major place.
Yeah.
James, so I saw that you went to Berkeley when I Googled you, because I'm a millennial. I Google my way through anything. And I noticed that you have this Bachelor of Arts English with honors and religious studies. And as the daughter of a world religion professor, I want to know, what was your favorite class in religion studies?
I really enjoyed learning about Hinduism. It was completely out of my experience at the time, and it really sort of changed what I believed about spirituality and philosophy. I think I originally wanted to be a philosophy major, and religious studies, especially that Hinduism class, was so compelling that I switched it to religious studies. And it just made me realize that there are a lot of other ways to try to access the spiritual parts of the world.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay, so James, I got one more for you. First of all, I'm gonna up the whiskey pairing game a little bit for those of you at home. I'm going to pour a little bit of this Navigator. And the reason I am is, first of all, cheers to you. Secondly, I'm going to drink this as I'm hoping you can recite to me your favorite political poet or poem that
Oh.
was, come on, I'm waiting for it. I'm ready to drink when you're ready to recite.
Okay.
Here we go.
The apparitions of these faces in the crowd. Petals on a wet black bow. That's Ezra Pound in a station at the Metro. Very short poem. That's why I can remember it.
It's
was gonna
perfect for a
say-
drink of whiskey.
I was gonna say, if it's not a limerick, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah. That
I was
was
gonna say political poetry. Didn't it die after our former president got kicked off of Twitter? I think that's-
That was beautiful. Come on, beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful poetry at Twitter.
one of the few poems about riding transit. I'm a bus rider, and also I don't know if y'all play Wordle, but
Yes,
bow was
we're not living under a rock as planners, okay? Like we do.
that
play
was a
Wordle.
word a couple of weeks ago, and I got to it I think in 3, and my Wordle group chat was like, I never even heard this word before. I was like, Ezra Pound, come on.
Like, well, you should read more political poetry. Oh my gosh.
There you go. All right. Well, James, we appreciate your time. I think that we'll wrap this up. And again, Planetizen, man, what a great site. What a great resource for practicing planners, and not just planners. I would also say really anybody in the decision-making process, right? Whether
Yeah.
you're an elected official, you're a public works person, or even a citizen. I know we have locally here in Boise a gentleman who started a blog a few years ago, and it just blew up on him. And the next thing you know, he's hired, I think, 3 or 4 staff members who came from the local media to television media at that. And, next thing you know, because people are genuinely interested.
And it's about growth and development.
Yeah,
and people,
totally.
hey, what's going on at the corner of this street and that street?
Yeah,
Track down the permit, the P&Z application and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What's the name of the site?
Well, we'll have to charge him, but go ahead, Don.
It's a Boise Dev.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yeah. But he did his work and your work, it captures people sometimes probably by surprise. And our local newspaper, I think, was totally was off guard. And the next thing you know, they're going, oh gosh, we're seeing this traffic that this person created. And the next thing you know, of course, they're following suit and trying to keep up, but if it's done right, and if our wording is correct, as you've pointed out, then, people will be interested in it. And, it's a subject I think all of us would agree is fascinating. And maybe I think a lot of people would agree if they just took a little bit of time, perused your website and maybe others, and just kind of dove into that pool. So James, thank you for your time being on the Planning Commission podcast. We appreciate it.
Thanks a lot for having me. I could have talked for another 30 minutes about this stuff. So
well, yeah, we find that happens a lot, and perhaps there will be a follow-up, especially if there's a couple of hot button particular blogs maybe that you all post that are worth talking about. That might be a perfect opportunity. So James, thank you very much. Commissioners, it's been fun. I had a shot. I'm feeling great. It's lunchtime. It's Friday. Let's go do this thing. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Awesome. Okay. With that, this episode of the Planning Commission podcast is coming to a close. Thank you all. We'll keep on trying. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.